Chapter 3, Broken, Part 1, by Oliver M. Goldblatt. "There it is," the doctor said with a broad smile, pointing to the image hovering in the air before them. "The Tstasutsian comet." "It's massive!" Romana cried, her mouth agape. "The largest known comet of its type, mistress," K9 began, "although larger comets are known to occur at 20+ billion years after the big—" "Show off," the doctor mumbled. "Oh, you just wanted to tell me yourself," Romana teased quietly. Grinning slyly, the doctor turned back to the control panel, then paused. "K9, take over." "Master?" K9 asked. "Fly the TARDIS for a moment. Take us in close, but not too close. I want to see this one too." K9 whirred forward, extended his nose stalk control, and began piloting the TARDIS slowly and carefully towards the comet. Romana was transfixed by the image. "What's at its core?" she asked. "Something harder than diamond," the doctor replied. "It's possible this isn't a comet at all, but a small rogue moon covered in ice." "Is it safe to land?" Romana asked. "Well," the doctor replied in mock uncertainty. "Now look," Romana continued, "we've faced far worse dangers than this, and the universe can look after itself for a few hours." The doctor smiled. "Why not? But we can't stop long." "Why's that?" "We're in the Magando system. That planet there," the doctor said, adjusting the image so they could see a blue world about 2 million miles away. "A former Earth colony, currently fighting a war with the Gulbanzi. But why shouldn't we get too close? The war will go so badly for them that in a year they'll build an interplanetary coalition, which will not only end the war but jumpstart the Galactic Federation. This is the beginning? Alpha Centauri's great-great-grandparent will be one of the founding members." "So," Romana sighed, "this is a fixed point in time. As long as we don't interfere with the planet itself, there shouldn't be any danger." The doctor returned to the comet on screen. "K9, store all data. Let's keep a record of this beast." "I'm sure she wouldn't like to be called that," Romana replied. "Oh, it's a she," the doctor said in mock surprise, flashing a friendly smile. "And where would you prefer to land?" The doctor never completed his question. Instead, something massive struck the TARDIS so violently that the doctor and Romana had crashed to the floor before they realized what was happening. Before the doctor lost consciousness, he thought he heard K9 calling. Everything was dark. The doctor was unsure if he were dreaming. He hovered above the control console, watching someone else's hands working the TARDIS controls. Then another set of hands joined them. Suddenly the darkness lifted and he opened his eyes. He was lying on the floor, watching Romana work frantically at the controls while K9 scanned his head. "How long was I out?" he asked. 2.7 minutes, K9 replied. "No physiological damage detected, Master. It is safe to stand." But the doctor was already on his feet. "I've managed to stabilize us, but," Romana said, "look at these readings." She pointed to a display and the doctor quickly joined her. "What hit us?" "A piece of Tstasutsian, I think, after she collided with something." "K9, the doctor ordered, "play back the recording." The image appeared in front of them again and wound back to its starting point. "Freeze there!" the doctor suddenly cried. "Zoom in directly ahead of the comet." K9 did so, revealing what appeared to be a gently spinning cuboctahedral satellite in front of Tstasutsian. "Do you recognize that technology?" the doctor asked Romana. "No." "K9? "Negative, Master." "That makes 3 of us. Roll it forward, then." K9 did so. The comet struck the satellite, resulting in a huge explosion which sent shockwaves flying in all directions. Small pieces of the comet broke off at the impact point, and the image of a large piece suddenly filled the room. The recording ended. "Doctor," Romana began slowly, "we're in space. There's no medium for shockwaves to travel through. It's either the thin atmosphere surrounding the comet, or," the doctor replied grimly, "temporal shockwaves." K9, Romana asked. Temporal shock waves, K9 replied, his ears whirring, reaching a peak of .1 on the Bocker scale. That's impos, Romana began, then caught herself. I really have to stop saying that. It's highly unlikely, the doctor agreed, especially that a satellite of that size should have a power source operating in 5 dimensions, let alone a mass capable of diverting that comet. Has the comet changed course, K9? Romana asked. It has, K9 replied. It will strike Magando in 3.1 days, mistress. The doctor and Romana turned toward each other. Each had become pale. But they're supposed to create the Galactic Federation, Romana exclaimed. K9, the doctor asked, how many Magandans will survive the impact? K9's ear sensors whirred for a moment. Then he said, given the mass and velocity of the comet, none, master. They stood silently for a moment. The web of time, Romana said quietly, will be broken, the doctor continued in a half-whisper. Shattered, if we can't find a way to prevent this. Then he began to pace, while Romana remained at the controls. Use the tractor beam, Romana finally said. The what? The doctor replied, stopping short. Remember how we diverted the course of that neutron star? Once it had a shell of aluminium around it, its mass was reduced enough that... She paused. Doctor, how exactly did adding mass to a star ultimately reduce it? I've always wondered about that. That's because it didn't, the doctor explained, looking somewhat ashamed. And the Type 40 didn't come with tractor beams. I assembled one from a kit. A kit? We pulled a neutron star out of its orbit using something knocked up from spare parts. Don't knock it. It worked, didn't it? And not spare parts, mostly. Look, I was in the 53rd century and it was a bargain. And, presumably, it affects aluminium more than other materials. Yes. So, she continued, if we could spin an aluminium shell around the comet, we could pull it off course. Presumably, the doctor said, and I know where we can find some. The space station was mostly empty, almost cavernous. Its corridors curved upward into the distance at both ends, revealing that the station was being spun around a central hub in order to maintain artificial gravity. Screens had been mounted into the walls, and all were playing their content quietly. Some were advertisements and some were itineraries. The latter indicated that no traffic was expected. Very little could be heard except the air conditioning units, until a wheezing, groaning noise erupted from nowhere as the TARDIS materialized in the empty corridor. After a moment, the doctor stepped out, followed by Romana and K9. Hello, the doctor called. His voice echoed through the emptiness. And this place is, Romana asked. The Constantinople 12, the doctor replied. A mining hub. The planet has 12 moons, all rich in rare minerals. That's what the war is about. Doesn't it always seem to be the way? The ore is brought here for processing. But it's deserted. Negative, replied K9, his ears whirring, detecting a dozen life forms scattered throughout the vessel. You see, the doctor replied, the station is mostly automated, but there's always someone on staff. So, you order the aluminium while I pop down to the planet's surface. What for? By now, they'll know the comet is on its way. Perhaps I can say to everyone, don't panic. Is that all? She replied with polite mockery, then became more serious. Good luck. And to you, the doctor replied, stepping into the TARDIS. In a moment, it dematerialized. Scan the area, K9, Romana ordered. K9 did so. Mistress, the nearest computer terminal is 500 meters ahead, and there is a humanoid life form above us. We'll split up, Romana said. You take the terminal, and I'll look for the life form. The doctor left the TARDIS and found himself on Magando, inside what appeared to be a large, empty aircraft hangar. Outside, he could hear what sounded like the roar of an ocean, but the volume increased, and he knew it was not water. It was the raised voices of many, many people. At the far end of the room was a set of large doors as well as a sizable monitor and keypad. Someone was knocking at the doors and more followed. Then the volume grew until all he could hear were muffled shouts and the sound of fists and sticks pounding against the entrance. The doctor moved quickly to the keypad and found the control for the external cameras. He had been right. Outside was a crowd 1,000 strong. Behind them, another 10,000 were racing toward this place, whatever it was. Behind them, another 1,000,000, all fleeing a sprawling, burning city. The doctor found the communications switch and turned on the video link to the outside. This is the doctor, he began. Please, a man shouted. He was wearing overalls, looked to be in his 40s, and was covered in dust, mud, and blood. "Let us in." "This hangar isn't big enough for everyone," the doctor replied. "Hangar," the man cried. "This is the bunker. Everyone knows that. Just open the doors or we'll tear it down." Before the doctor could respond, a siren rang out inside the hangar. The doctor put his hands to his ears and turned, only to see 4 tall, slim robots glide toward him. 3 were silver, but one, presumably the leader, was gold-colored. Each had a gun of some kind where their right hands should have been, and all 4 were pointed at the doctor. "Take him," the gold robot ordered, and before he could protest, the doctor was bundled away from the keypad and the TARDIS towards the far end of the hangar. The siren went quiet, leaving only the cries of 1,000 desperate people. Romana found a lift and took it to the next level. When she stepped off, she wondered if she had moved at all. The corridors were empty and almost identical. She looked in both directions and called, "Hello?" Her voice echoed through the emptiness. She thought she saw movement to her left and went that way. "I'm here to make a purchase," she called, although with what currency she did not know. That she would happily leave to the doctor to negotiate. First, she had to make sure that they had sufficient quantities of aluminium available and— "Halt!" a young high voice called from behind her. Romana held up her hands and began to turn. "Don't turn around." Whoever he was breathing heavily. In fact, he sounded more frightened than she was. "I've got one," he cried. "Who is that?" A voice called from the other end of a communicator. "Report in properly." "Private Cod Brown 9. I've apprehended a Gulbansi spy," he said proudly. "Good work, Cod. We'll be down in a moment." "But I can bring her up to the command deck myself," Cod complained. "It won't be any problem." "Her?" the voice asked incredulously. "Yes. She's dressed in such pretty clothes. My mum would love an outfit like that." "Oh," said Romana over her shoulder. "Thank you." "Listen, Cod," the voice bellowed. "You stay put until we get there, and don't do anything foolish. Manan's out." Cod sighed, and Romana asked, "Would it be all right if I turned round?" "Well," Cod began, "I suppose so. But keep your hands up. I'm armed." Romana turned and was unsurprised to see a kid, no more than 16, wearing a private's uniform and pointing a plasma rifle at her. He looked frightened and nervous, but not a killer. Romana sighed in relief. "What?" Cod asked. "Oh, it's just that you look so nice in your uniform," Romana lied. Cod blushed. "Oh, thank you," he said, then quickly recovered. "But I don't think I should be talking to spies." "I'm not a spy," Romana protested. "I'm here to—" Before she could finish, a lift door opened, and 2 older men in uniform stepped out and quickly made their way towards her and Cod. "Now, what's going on, Cod?" a man in a captain's uniform asked as he marched toward Cod. When he saw Romana, he stopped in his tracks and stared at her in awe. "Good Lord," he whispered. "I say," his sergeant added, flashing a charming smile at Romana. "What a pretty outfit." "Oh, thank you," Romana replied, her hands still up. "I made it myself." "Oh, how interesting," replied the sergeant. He was so sincere and charming that Romana could not help but smile. The sergeant turned to his captain. "Don't you think she might put her hands down, sir?" The captain finally closed his mouth and nodded brusquely at Romana, who complied. "What's your name?" he asked. "Romana." "Such a lovely name," the sergeant said, smiling. "This is Captain Manance. That's Private Cod. And I'm Sergeant Wilkins." "That'll do, Wilkins," Manance barked. "Sorry, sir," Wilkins replied. Manance turned to Romana. "Now look here, Romana, I command this station. What are you doing here?" "She's a spy," Cod interjected. "Would a spy dress like that?" Manance barked at Cod. "Would the Gulbansi send a female agent to a space station manned by, well, men?" "Sorry, Captain Manance," Cod said, looking down at the floor. "Stupid boy," Manance muttered. "Actually," Romana said, "I'm here to buy aluminium in order to prevent a comet colliding with your world in just a few days." The 3 soldiers looked at her, then each other in surprise. "And what comet might that be?" Manance asked. The doctor was marched through a series of sizable corridors until at last they came to a small interrogation room, where the doctor was herded toward a slim metal chair sitting across from an old desk. "I'm supposed to sit, am I?" the doctor asked, fixing his coat. "When the interrogator arrives," the gold robot replied, "you will sit. Until then, standing is optional, but you may not leave." "I have a question or two, Gold," the doctor said to the gold robot. "You may ask," Gold replied. "All questions will be logged for future analysis." "What's the bunker?" You are in the bunker, a survival shelter for those selected to survive. You mean the elites of this world? Correct, Gold responded. How many does it hold? That information is classified. There seem to be several million people outside. Why not let them in? There would be neither room nor resources, Gold answered. We are already at 99.98% capacity, and the planet is on full emergency. You're referring to the comet, the doctor added. Correct. In that case, Gold, your superiors may want to know. Before the doctor could continue, a bored young military officer in a lieutenant's uniform entered the room. He did not meet the doctor's gaze. Instead, he rubbed his eyes and looked at Gold. Start, the lieutenant ordered. The silver robot suddenly turned on the doctor, pushing him until he moved back and sat in the chair. Is this how you treat VIPs? The doctor asked the soldier, who ignored the question. Still not looking at the doctor, the lieutenant sat, stifled a yawn, and asked, Truth detector on? Yes, Gold replied. Finally, the lieutenant turned to the doctor and reeled off a speech that he had apparently recited many, many times before. You will answer all my questions honestly and truthfully. The truthfulness of your statements will be assessed through voice analysis. Lying or attempts to evade the truth will be logged and used as evidence if and when you are brought to trial. Is that understood? Yes, the doctor replied. Truthful statement, Gold said to the lieutenant. Who are you, and what is your rank and/or diplomatic status? The lieutenant asked, rubbing his eyes. The doctor, a Time Lord, the doctor replied. The lieutenant looked as if he had heard of the Time Lords but could not place them. The doctor leaned forward and added, Rank, former president of the Earth. The lieutenant's eyes widened. The doctor began to enjoy this. Also, former president of the High Council of the Time Lords, he added with a smirk. Whatever military bearing the lieutenant had possessed was almost gone. He turned to Gold with his mouth agape. Truthful statements, Gold replied. The lieutenant turned pale as the doctor continued. And your superiors might want to know that I have a way of diverting that comet, provided they meet my terms. Truthful statement, Gold said. The lieutenant almost fell out of his chair as he scrambled backward toward the door. With his eyes fixed on the doctor, he opened it, backed out, and slammed it shut before running down the hallway. The doctor smiled, leaned back in his chair, clasped his hands behind his head, and put his feet up on the desk. Do not put your feet on the desk, Gold warned. The doctor's feet and smile remained where they were. Please, he said calmly. I'm a VIP. Truthful statement, Gold replied. Romana stood with Captain Manans, Sergeant Wilkins, Private Codd, and 7 other soldiers on the command deck. Except for Codd and another private, all of them appeared to be in their 60s or older. The main computer displayed information on the Tsutsuyun comet and its trajectory, due to collide with Magando in less than 3 days. All of the men were understandably shocked and subdued. Why didn't they tell us? Manans finally hissed. We haven't been able to establish communications with Control Center in 2 weeks, you see, Wilkins explained to Romana. We thought that there might be trouble back home. He turned away, unable to go on. I'm very sorry, Romana said, but there's still hope. I'm here because the doctor and I might be able to prevent this disaster. But I'm a doctor, one of the grey-haired privates replied. Private Gottfried, he added, general practitioner, retired. No, I meant the doctor, the man I travel with, Romana clarified. Oh, forgive me, Gottfried said meekly and turned away. Finally, Manans stepped forward. Now look, men, I realize this must be a shock, but if there's any chance we can help prevent this, we must. We aren't defeated yet, are we? No, sir, the men replied sullenly and quietly. I said, Manans repeated sternly, we're not defeated yet. No, sir, the men replied forcefully. Excuse me, Captain Manans, Codd asked. What is it, Codd? Aren't we going to use the truth device on her? He said, pointing at Romana. Oh, really, Fred, Wilkins replied. I think we can take her word given the circumstances. Blimey, said a private who appeared to be in his early 30s. If he did want her interrogated, I'd volunteer pretty sharpish. Before Romana could reply, Manans barked, That's enough of that, Walken. Sir, Private Walken replied as he stood to attention, but without any sense of remorse Romana could detect. This young lady needs aluminium, Manans continued, addressing Walken personally. And lots of it. Go down to the hold, double-check our supply, and don't dawdle. Sir, Walken replied, quickly leaving the command deck. And don't call Private Codfred while on duty, Manans hissed to Wilkins. Sorry, sir, Wilkins replied. In the meantime, Manans continued in a louder voice, We must re-establish communications with Magando. Can I help? Romana asked, after the men had been dismissed. Manans looked at Wilkins, then back to Romana. Perhaps I shouldn't ask this, Manans began, but why do you want to help us? You're not Magandan. I'm a Time Lord, Romana replied. Manans and Wilkins looked at each other in confusion, but neither appeared willing to ask what she meant. Rather than offer a technical explanation, Romana said, to put it simply, the future of the galaxy won't be the same without you. Wilkins's smile returned. Then he turned to Manans and nodded. Any help you can offer, Manans said to Romana, would be greatly appreciated. Indeed, Wilkins added. Besides making such lovely outfits, do you have any other specialities? Communications? Robotics? Both, Romana said with a smile. And more. Where would you like me to start? Taking the express lift, Walken was already 30 levels down and approaching the processed aluminium hold. In the shadows up ahead, he saw something move, about the size of a large dog. Oi! Walken cried. Come out of there! Who told you to clean this level? Go clean my quarters, you daft! But then Walken saw that it was not a cleaning droid at all. Before he could turn and hit the alarm button on the wall, a yellow blast of light struck his chest, and he fell lifeless to the floor. Then, it began moving towards the command deck. Within moments, a woman wearing a major's uniform had opened the door of the interrogation room. She had short brown hair and, unlike the lieutenant, had a bearing not only of toughness, but also competence. I'm so sorry about this, sir, she said to the doctor. I'm Major Breen. Would you come this way, please? The doctor got up, tugged at his coat, and followed her. I take it my message was delivered? He asked. It was. I'm taking you to Undersecretary Haining, where the doctor cut her off. Undersecretary? He asked. All higher-ranking officials are already ensconced in the bunker, she replied, and communications are down. We apologize for this breach of protocol. They soon made their way to a staging area, where men in jumpsuits were minding robots as they sorted various boxes and supplies onto conveyor belts. They were being closely monitored by armed guards, all women, the doctor noticed. Where is the Undersecretary? The doctor inquired, taking in his surroundings. To your right. They turned, and a woman dressed in a very expensive outfit was rushing toward them. She was trailed by 4 female guards and 6 silver robots. I'm so sorry to have kept you waiting, she said, adjusting her glasses and looking the doctor over. Undersecretary Haining, she said at last, apparently unimpressed with her guest. The doctor. Neither had reached out their hand. We haven't much time, Haining said somewhat nervously, but if you indeed have a way to help us out of our little problem. She trailed off, glancing over her shoulder at several large doors at the other end of the room. What's down there? The doctor asked calmly, following her gaze. Those are the entrances to the survival chambers, Breen replied. This is merely a staging area. Yes, the doctor replied, watching a female guard point a gun at a man in a jumpsuit who had stopped working. I take it you're about to seal yourselves in? Indeed, Haining replied. About your plan? And these men in jumpsuits, the doctor interrupted. Presumably they'll come with you? I'm sure that the details of our survival operation, Haining began, are exactly what I need to know in order to best help Magando, the doctor said firmly. Haining looked unhappy for a moment, but quickly recovered. They shall not be joining us. Only Magandans of a certain social or military rank have a place in the shelters. Now, as to your plan, it requires a large amount of aluminium, the doctor said. I take it you had a revolution. 2 weeks ago, she replied proudly, the women of this planet erased millennia of repression. There was a shot and a cry. They turned to see a man on the floor holding his arm and writhing in pain. Breen gasped. The work had stopped as the men turned to face the female guards. One had her gun drawn. The others were drawing theirs. Breen slowly drew her sidearm and took a step to place herself between the doctor and incoming fire. I thought you'd been conquered by the Movellans, the doctor said to Haining as he looked around nervously. The who? Haining replied. Nothing, the doctor said, then muttered. Fragments of fragments. Undersecretary Haining, Breen began, her eyes scanning the workers and their guards. Now, time presses, Haining said to the doctor, ignoring Breen while flashing a broad, false smile. What is your plan? The doctor began looking over Haining's shoulder back in the direction of the TARDIS. To use a tractor beam to, he began. Undersecretary Haining, Breen repeated, louder than before. The doctor turned and saw the men had picked up whatever improvised weaponry they could find. Several guards were shouting at them to return to work. Major Breen, Haining snapped. You will... Suddenly, more shots rang out. The guards, outnumbered, began to shoot into the crowd. Breen cried, Code D! She pushed the doctor toward the entrances to the shelter. Two of the robots guarding Haining had peeled away to help Breen whisk the doctor toward one of the entrances. But, the doctor protested, he had already lost sight of Haining. "We have to move, sir," Breen cried. Someone began throwing jars of pickles in their direction. Broken glass and vinegar spilled across the floor. It was now a full-scale riot. "That's one way of opening them, I suppose," the doctor muttered distractedly, but he had barely begun to form an objection when he found they were already inside with several workers close behind them. The robots moved to keep them back as Breen pressed a button. Heavy doors slowly descended as sirens blared. "My TARDIS!" the doctor protested futilely. He tried to slip past Breen in order to dash under the doors and get out, but she managed to hold him back. "You can't, sir!" she shouted. The doctor turned to her. "Can't. There's no such word as—" But the doors had finally shut with a thud, and the sirens went quiet. "I'm afraid," Major Breen said after a moment, "you're in with us now, sir." The doctor looked at the door, then its control panel. There was no power, and the doors were so solid that he could no longer hear the riot on the other side. He turned to Breen, who was leaning against the wall, trembling slightly. Then he looked at the corridor leading into the shelter. At this end, it looked like a long walk into nothing. "Romana," the doctor whispered, trapped with strangers and utterly alone. Manance and Wilkins stood on the command deck introducing the communication system to Romana when they were interrupted by a call. "Yes?" Manance asked. "Permission to speak, sir," came a thin, reedy voice. No picture could be seen on any of the screens. "How long has the video been out?" Romana asked Wilkins. 2 days. We're not sure why." "What is it, Smith?" Manance asked in an exasperated voice. "That's Lance Corporal Smith," Wilkins explained quietly to Romana. "He's in Grey 17 with Private Duff." "Something's going on down here, sir. Private Duff and I keep hearing movement." "That may be my dog," Romana added. Manance and Wilkins turned to her. "Your what?" Manance asked. "My robot dog," Romana clarified. "In case we couldn't find anyone, I sent him to find a terminal." Manance sighed and returned to the communicator. "Does it look like a robot? A robot dog?" "A what?" Smith replied. "You heard me." "No, sir. We haven't seen it. We just keep hearing. Hang on a minute." There was silence on the other end, and then another voice spoke. "Duff, here, sir." The voice had a Scots accent and seemed as old and gnarled as an ancient oak tree. "I think you'd better come down here." "Why, what's the matter?" Manance asked. "Walken is dead, sir," Duff replied flatly. The command deck went silent, and then everyone turned to Romana. "But K9 couldn't have killed him," she protested. "Is that your robot dog's name?" Manance asked acidly. "K9? "Are you saying your dog would never kill anyone?" Wilkins asked. "No," Romana conceded, "except in self-defense." "Cod!" Manance shouted. Cod quickly appeared next to Romana. "Sir!" "The 4 of us will go to Grey 17. If this young lady does anything suspicious, shoot her in the leg. Is that understood? I want her alive for questioning." "Sir!" Cod unshouldered his plasma rifle and aimed it at Romana's ankle. "Perhaps if I called K9 from here and told him where to meet us," Romana suggested. "No," Manance replied flatly. "Now move." Romana was bundled into the lift and stood silently beside them as they traveled through the station. Manance and Cod were looking at her as if they hoped to determine who she really was, ally or saboteur. But Wilkins only looked at the floor, occasionally shaking his head. "Poor Walken," he sighed quietly. Soon the lift stopped, and they exited and turned right. They found Smith and Duff, both of whom appeared to be in their early 70s. They were standing over a body. Duff looked up and saw Romana. His eyes went wide and his mouth hung open stupidly. "Smith!" he hissed, nudging Smith. "Not now, Duff," Smith replied. "Poor Walken." Then he looked up. "Blimey, where did she come from, Captain Manance?" "She's either behind Walken's death or a customer. We don't know which. If she tries to make a run for it," he began. "First of all, I'm truly sorry for your loss," Romana said, looking down at Walken's body. "But I'm here to acquire aluminium in order to save your world from destruction. And second, my dog didn't kill this man." "Your what?" Duff cried. "Quiet in the ranks," Manance snapped. "What makes you say it wasn't your dog?" Wilkins asked. "Those burns," Romana said, pointing to Walken's chest. Not only was his body partially burned, but his shirt was scorched and still smoking. "That was caused by a plasma weapon operating at 1500 megawatts or higher. K9's blaster operates at 800 megawatts and disrupts biological processes, the nervous system and the like." "Do we believe her, sir?" Cod asked Manance. "Not yet," he replied. Then perhaps you'll also consider this, Romana added, looking up at the dimly lit bulkheads. Turn all the lights on in this corridor, then look in that direction, she ordered, pointing away from Walken's legs. Manans turned to Wilkins. Do it. Wilkins reached for a wall panel, brightening the corridor. Once their eyes had adjusted, they saw that the floor was covered in a thin layer of dust, and in the dust they could see signs that Walken's body had been dragged. I was with you the whole time, Romana said, so I couldn't have done this, and K9 isn't big enough to drag something this size. Something else killed Walken and dragged his body to this location. But why? Cod asked, nearly shouting. Because, Duff replied dourly, whoever killed him didn't want us to know what he was up to. He may be right, sir, Wilkins said to Manans. Smith, Duff, Manans ordered. Take care of Walken's body, then get back to the command deck. The rest of us will follow this trail. If I may, Romana said, slowly reaching into an inside pocket. Slowly, Manans warned. Romana carefully pulled out a small flashlight and turned it on. Suddenly the drag marks were clear for all to see. Both tachyons and light neutrons, she explained, among other frequencies. This way. Before Cod could stop her, she was leading the group with Manans following closely, then Wilkins, with Cod following nervously at the back. This doesn't mean I trust you, Manans hissed to Romana. I understand your predicament, Romana said, but I promise, I'm here to help. Manans said nothing, and they followed the route which led to a lift. Where did this lift just come from? Manans asked Wilkins. I've no idea, sir. I didn't bring the lift diagnostic kit. Captain Manans, Cod said quietly. I distinctly told you to bring the lift diagnostic kit, Manans argued. You never said anything about the lift diagnostic kit, Wilkins replied, as if this were another iteration of a long-standing argument. Captain Manans, Cod said, his eyes wide and fixed at something down the corridor. They all turned to look. A black robot the size of a large dog with red glowing eyes was moving toward them in the darkness. Is that? Cod squeaked. The droid stepped into the light and uncoiled itself into a 7-foot-tall armored droid. It raised its left arm. Instead of a hand, the arm terminated in a long, serrated sword. A laser protruded from the middle of its chest, glowing yellow. You will surrender and answer my questions, it bellowed. Into the lift, Romana ordered, pressing the lift control button. The doors opened, and everyone scrambled inside. Manans quickly operated the controls, and the doors closed again. They heard the slam of a metallic fist against the bulkhead, but they were already moving away. Manans pressed a communications button and said, Intruder alert! Some kind of killer robot. Condition Red 1 to be put into effect immediately. Well, Wilkins said once he had caught his breath, I think it's safe to say that Romana's dog did not kill poor Walken. Yes, I agree, Manans said. With a glance at Romana, he added, My apologies. Do you know what that robot was? Romana asked, as if she had not heard him. Gulbansi, Cod answered. It looked like that old picture of a Gulbansi special operations droid. That's exactly what it is, Romana said. Well done. Cod blushed in the excitement. How long has it been here? Manans demanded from no one in particular. At least 2 days, Romana replied. The soldiers looked at her. That's how long video communications have been down, she added. The first phase of its operations was likely sabotage, and then interrogation. But why is it here in the first place? Wilkins asked. Not to destroy the station, Manans said. It's had enough time to blow the reactors, and since it wants information, it's likely that Walken disturbed it when... Manans's eyes widened. You sent Walken to check the aluminium stores, sir, Wilkins said. But it couldn't have known we needed aluminium, Romana said. Oh, K9, where are you? The doctor turned to Breen, who was wiping her eyes. Sorry, she said. My little brother's out there. If he's as tough as you, the doctor said, he'll survive. Do you really have a way to stop that comet? She asked. Yes, if we can get out. That's impossible, Breen snapped. The bunker was designed. The farther down we go, the doctor interrupted. The closer we get to the power station, the food stores, the air supply, and that's where we'll find whoever's in charge. You mean Madam President? Indeed, the doctor continued, and no leader would be stupid enough to live at the bottom of a pit with no way out. And you, a man, are willing to save Magando. What's my chromosomal sequencing have to do with it? Nothing, Breen said, and then realized what she had said. She unconsciously covered her mouth and looked around nervously. I take it, the doctor said. You've just spoken blasphemy. Breen hesitated for a moment, then nodded. And that means you must obey your female superiors without question. This isn't what I signed up for, Breen said, shaking her head. I wanted to help in the war effort, not force my brother into a labor camp. But that's what I've done, she said quietly. And yet you stood up to Haining just now, the doctor added. Yes, and you kept me alive when the shooting started. Yes, well, and now you realize the revolution has gone too far. Breen paused, then said, They told us there would be equality. This isn't it. Then we should make a good team, the doctor said with satisfaction. We? Are you up for it? Breen's face became grim for a moment. It would be mutiny. It's your choice, he replied calmly but firmly. Breen stood silently for a moment, then turned to the control panel and pressed a button. I've ordered a vehicle. How many levels in the shelter? The doctor asked. 30. We'll need an express elevator to take us as far down as possible. How do you know the details of this establishment? Breen asked. You've never been here before. Logic, the doctor replied. Madam President wouldn't tolerate delays. Very perceptive, Breen said after a moment. A robot appeared piloting a small taxi-like vehicle. They quickly got inside, and the machine sped off. What's the plan? Breen asked. We'll need the TARDIS to get to the Constantinople 12. I have a friend up there purchasing aluminium. With that we can save Magando, assuming we have enough time. Soon they passed another vehicle, then another. After a minute the corridor was full of traffic. Their vehicle slowed as they entered a forum of an underground city. They slowly made their way around pedestrians, both men and women, who appeared dazed and weary, with haunted, downcast faces. The workers live here, Breen said to the doctor, anticipating his question. How did they get their golden ticket? Influence, Breen replied simply. These are the personal servants of the new order. Then to the robot. Section Z3. The driver turned right and continued to make its way through the traffic. Eventually the crowd thinned, and they came to a series of buildings protected by armed guards and barbed wire. They all appeared to be women. Breen showed her pass and was waved through. They eventually made their way to a hut. Return, Breen said to the robot once they had got out, and the robot sped away. What is this place? The doctor asked. You'll see, Breen said. They entered and found a deserted room. A painting hung crookedly on the wall. Breen marched toward it, straightened it, then tapped on its surface. The wall next to it slid open, revealing a lift. Security access, Breen said. Not for supplies. The doctor smiled and entered the elevator. In a moment, it plunged downward. We'll exit onto level 28, Breen said. That's as far as my access allows. What's down there? Undersecretaries, mostly. Ah, the doctor said with distaste. Haining again. Breen sighed and nodded. We'll need to contact the Constantinople 12. We can try, but we've been out of contact with them since the revolution, Breen explained. What? No one's sure why, and restoring communications won't be a priority. That station is where military careers go to die, and the new environmental policy is to preserve our 12 moons in their natural state. A laudable goal, the doctor replied, but rotten timing. Then the elevator stopped, and the doors opened. There was no one outside. They could hear nothing, and see very little in the dim light. Why would this section be deserted? The doctor asked. It shouldn't be, Breen replied quietly, drawing her sidearm. They stepped out slowly, but not before Breen pressed a few more buttons. I've locked the door open, she explained. Good thinking, the doctor replied, just before he tripped over something. Taking out a torch from his pocket, he saw it was a body lying on its front. Breen, he called, bending down. I see it, she replied, joining him. It was the body of a security guard with a rank of first lieutenant. Then something squelched beneath their shoes. It was blood. Help me turn her over, the doctor said. They did, and immediately recoiled. Breen clutched her mouth and tried not to scream. Quickly, the doctor shouted, taking Breen's arm and almost dragging her away, yet neither could wrench their eyes from the charnel horror before them. Romana and the 11 surviving soldiers stationed on the Constantinople 12 stood on the command deck. Each had been issued a firearm and was staring at the main hatch. All security measures had been activated, but they were not sure that would keep the droid out. Romana was working at the computer. The first thing it did when it arrived, Romana said, was to infiltrate your systems. Nothing works correctly, except the environmental controls. It wanted us alive, sir, Wilkins said to Munnins. Suddenly they heard a loud bang outside the hatch, then another. It's outside, muttered Duff nervously. We're doomed. It's coming through, cried Smith. Don't panic, don't panic. What are we going to do, Captain Munnins? Cod whined. We stay calm, Munnins barked. Everybody, stay calm. It's not through the doors yet. Then he turned to Romana. Where's your dog? Can't he help? If he were here, yes, but I can't find him anywhere on the station. Either the sensors have been tampered with or— Romana could not finish the sentence. Manance patted her arm. There, my dear, do the best you can. Another loud bang, this time stronger than before. Can it get in, do you think? Wilkins asked Romana. Yes. Reverse interrogation, Manance said after a pause. What's that, sir? Smith asked. We open the door, and when it interrogates us, we act stupid. Try to get it to reveal as much about its mission as possible. Do you think that's wise, sir? Wilkins replied. I mean, a special operations droid would hardly fall for that. Well, we have to try something, Manance countered. The mines, Duff cried. The what? Romana asked. In the security locker. Duff moved toward a wall marked with security warnings. He punched a code into a keypad and a large door opened. He took out a metal disc the size of a dinner plate, then closed the door. It's magnetic, Wilkins said to Romana. Aye, Duff cried. Slap this on him, then hit the deck. But an explosion in a room this size, Romana said. The pressure change would deafen us, or worse. What did she say? Gottfried asked Duff. Nothing, you cloth-eared old coot, Duff grumbled. Gottfried did not seem to hear that either. The banging continued, and the hatch was beginning to buckle. We don't have a choice, Manance said. Hide that mine. When the chance comes, the nearest soldier will attach it to the droid. Then we all drop. Understood? Yes, sir, they replied. But, Romana began. Open the hatch, Manance ordered. Cod did so. The door slid back, and the special operations droid entered the room, towering over them, their lives in its metal hands.
Masters, mistresses, the Doctor requires materials in order to maintain the TARDIS and ensure continued functionality. He similarly requires carbon-based comestibles to sustain his own biological functions and existence. Master would never say this, but he requires aid beyond that supplied by this unit in order to acquire these. To aid the Doctor in his various tasks and creations, this can be most effectively achieved via Patreon or Substack subscriptions, or through donations directly to PayPal. Or if you desire physical goods in return for your contributions, written accounts of my travels with the Doctor are also available on Amazon. Links are in the description below. Thank you, masters, mistresses.